Story number 1. This happened 2 years ago, and even though I've worked in a hospital long enough to see terrible things, this still creeps me out when I think about it. I was a doctor at the local hospital back then, mostly working evening and night shifts. We had a case that stuck with me. A boy, just 9 years old, was admitted under psychiatric care. He had suicidal tendencies, erratic behavior, and what the notes called psychic thoughts. At first, I thought it was just a fancy way of saying delusional, but meeting him in person felt wrong in a way I can't explain. The first time I walked into his room, he was sitting cross-legged on the bed. His grin was too wide for his face, stretched in a way that almost looked painful, and his voice was hoarse, as if he had been whispering or screaming for hours. Kids can be unsettling when they're unwell, but this wasn't just a sick kid. There was something about him that felt off, like I wasn't supposed to be there. It started with small things. I'd find him standing in the corridor when he wasn't supposed to be out of bed, dragging his fingernails against the wall until they bled. No matter how many times the nurses trimmed his nails or wrapped his hands, he'd find a way to keep doing it. Sometimes when I was working alone with him in the consultation room, I'd feel a presence right behind me. Out of the corner of my eye, I'd catch him standing so close, almost leaning forward, as if he was about to attack me. But the moment I turned around, he'd be back in his chair, playing absently with surgical tools left on the desk, like nothing had happened. One afternoon during an evaluation, he began describing in a disturbingly calm voice how he would kill his mother. He said he'd strangle her with a telephone cord, even describing how he'd wait until she was in the kitchen, so her struggling wouldn't be heard. He added gruesome details, what her face would look like, how long it would take for her breathing to stop. He was only 9, but he spoke with the clarity of someone who had actually rehearsed it. I remember sitting there, pen frozen in my hand, trying to keep my professional composure while my stomach turned. It got worse. Late one night, I was finishing paperwork in one of the empty offices. The corridor lights outside my door kept flickering, the way old fluorescent bulbs do. At first, I ignored it. Hospitals are full of weird sounds and malfunctions, and you get used to it. But then I noticed something moving in the glass reflection of my door. The boy was walking slowly down the corridor. His head was tilted down, and one of his hands was dripping with what looked like blood. I froze, too afraid to go out there, but too afraid to stay. The lights flickered again, buzzing so loudly it hurt my ears, and when they steadied, he was gone. The corridor was completely empty. I walked out and checked every room, every hallway. Nothing. He was locked in his ward. There was no way he could have been out there. I told myself it was stress, maybe a trick of my tired brain. I'd been working too many shifts. But after that night, everything about him unnerved me. Every time I saw him, it felt like he was waiting for something. A week later, something happened that I can't explain away so easily. We received an emergency case. A woman brought in after being found unresponsive at home. She was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Cause of death, strangulation with a telephone cord. I can't describe the feeling in my chest when I heard it, because it was exactly the way the boy had described killing his mother, down to the smallest detail. The strangest part? The woman wasn't related to the boy at all. Different family, different background, no connection that we could ever find. It wasn't his mother, but it was his plan. Exactly his plan. After that, I started noticing things I couldn't dismiss. Whenever I walked past his room, I'd hear faint scratching, even when I knew he wasn't touching the walls. Some nights I swore I could hear whispering in the empty corridors like a child talking to someone. But when I followed the sound, there was no one there. One morning during rounds, I found a drawing tucked under his pillow. It wasn't unusual for children to draw, but this wasn't crayon scribbles. It was a pencil sketch, almost disturbingly detailed. It showed a woman in a kitchen, her face twisted in agony, a cord around her neck. I don't know where he even got a pencil like that. Every time I tried to rationalize, something else chipped away at my skepticism. I still remember the last time I saw him. He was sitting in his bed, his fingernails bandaged, his face pale. He wasn't smiling for once. He just stared at me, eyes locked, unblinking, as though he knew what I had seen and what I was thinking. That stare felt heavier than anything else, like he was inside my head, daring me to say something. The boy was eventually transferred to another facility, and I never heard what became of him. But the timing of that woman's death has never left me. The details match too perfectly, too precise to be coincidence, but too impossible to be real. Some nights when I work late and the corridor lights flicker, I get that same feeling again. The sense that someone small is standing just behind me, waiting. I tell myself it's nothing, just fatigue, just paranoia. But every once in a while, I swear I catch the faint sound of nails dragging against the walls, and I can never quite convince myself it's all in my head. Story number 2. I've been working as a nurse for about 4 years now at the city hospital. It's a hard job emotionally and physically, but what's kept me sane through it all has been my best friend Ashley. We've known each other since our freshman year of college. We went through exams, sleepless study nights, and finally landed here together. Same floor, same shifts most of the time. It felt like fate paired us up to survive the chaos. But about a month ago, things with Ashley started to feel different. I couldn't pinpoint what it was at first. She still laughed at the same stupid memes I sent, still picked up extra shifts with me when the unit was understaffed. But there was something in her eyes, like she was looking through me instead of at me. It really began the day she was assigned to room 102. Room 102 was nothing special, just an elderly man admitted for recurring heart problems. I'd seen him dozens of times. He was fragile but polite, the kind of patient you didn't dread checking on. Ashley went in for her routine rounds, and when she came back out, she didn't say anything. She just walked straight to the washroom. I didn't think much of it until I followed a few minutes later. That's when I heard it. She was inside one of the stalls whispering. Except it wasn't like whispering. The sound had this low, grinding pitch beneath it, almost like two voices layered together. The words didn't make sense. They weren't English. They weren't even a language I recognized. Just harsh syllables spilling out fast, guttural, and broken up by sharp intakes of breath. I froze outside the door, my skin prickling. The fluorescent light above flickered once and steadied, buzzing louder than usual. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe she was crying. Maybe she was praying. Maybe it was just something I didn't need to intrude on. Still, the sound stuck with me. That night we were on shift together again. Around 2 a.m., the ward was quiet, just the distant beeping of monitors and the shuffle of night staff. Then I heard it, a scream, high-pitched, piercing, the kind that tears through your chest before you even process it. It came from room 102. I sprinted there. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. Ashley was in the middle of the room, standing beside the bed, screaming like her lungs would split. Her face was twisted, mouth open wide, her body shaking with it. But the patient was asleep. His chest rose and fell slowly, peacefully, completely unbothered. The scream should have woken him, should have woken everyone. But when I looked outside, the other nurses were calmly moving around, heads bent over their paperwork, like nothing had happened. I felt like I was in a bubble. Only me and her, only me hearing it. Then just as suddenly, she stopped. She looked at me, blank, her eyes flat and tired. She brushed past me and walked out without saying a word. The days after that, I couldn't stop noticing little things. Ashley's hands trembled when she filled syringes. She stared too long at patients when she thought no one was looking. I'd find her in random hallways, standing perfectly still, just staring at the wall. I tried to ask if she was okay, but she'd always shrug it off or laugh, like I was the weird one for noticing. And then came the locker room. It was after another night shift. I stayed behind to finish up charting, and when I went to grab my bag, I heard a dull thud, then another. Rhythmic, steady. The sound was coming from the locker row. When I turned the corner, my stomach dropped. Ashley was there, slamming her forehead against her locker. Over and over, a sick metallic clang each time. Her hair was matted with sweat, her face pale, but she didn't even flinch at the impact. I rushed forward, calling her name, trying to pull her back. She didn't respond. Her eyes were open but unfocused, like she was looking through the steel. I grabbed her shoulders and shook her. For a second, everything stilled. Then she turned to me. Her eyes were brimming red, not from crying, but from blood. Thick tears spilled down her cheeks, staining her skin. More pooled in her lower lids, wet and glossy under the harsh locker room lights. The sight made my legs buckle. I couldn't move. She just stood there, silently crying blood, her chest heaving like she'd run a marathon. And then, it stopped. No warning, no explanation. She blinked, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and it was clear. Just wet. No blood. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. The next day I tried to bring it up. She laughed, said nothing like that ever happened, asked if I was getting enough sleep. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe the long shifts and lack of daylight were messing with my head. But I know what I saw. I can still see it when I close my eyes. The strangest part? Room 102 is empty now. The elderly patient was discharged, but the room hasn't been reassigned. No one goes in. The lights are always off. I've asked why, and the head nurse just shrugs, says there's no reason. But sometimes when I pass it, I swear I hear something inside. A faint hum, a murmur, like voices trying to crawl out of the walls. Ashley's still here, still working beside me, still smiling like nothing's wrong. But every now and then, I catch her reflection in the glass of a monitor or a window. And sometimes her reflection doesn't move the same way she does. I don't know what's wrong with her. I don't know what's wrong with me either. Maybe this job has finally gotten to my head. Maybe it's sleep deprivation, stress. Anything would be easier to accept than the alternative. But I can't shake the feeling that something followed her out of room 102. And now, it's waiting for me. Story number 3. I've never been the kind of person who believed in ghosts. I grew up rolling my eyes at horror stories and telling myself that everything could be explained if you just looked hard enough. Even after working night shifts in a hospital, seeing patients come in mangled, lifeless, or gone within hours, I still thought all that spirit-lingering stuff was nonsense. That changed 6 months ago. It was one of those nights when the ER felt endless. Bright fluorescent lights, machines beeping in the distance, that sterile smell of disinfectant clinging to everything. I was exhausted, running mostly on caffeine and adrenaline. I ducked into the supply closet to wash my hands, and that's where it started. The sink there has an old mirror bolted above it. I wasn't paying attention, just washing up, rubbing sanitizer raw into my palms, when I caught something in the reflection. Behind me, just off to the left, there was a woman. She wasn't one of my coworkers. She was standing too still, too quiet. She wore a thin white hospital gown, her hair stringy and unkempt, falling over her face. My chest went cold. I spun around fast, almost knocking over a mop bucket, but the closet was empty. Nothing but shelves stacked with gloves, gauze, and saline bags. I forced a laugh at myself, muttered something under my breath, and turned back to the sink. But when my eyes hit the mirror again, she was there. Closer this time. Her face had surfaced through the curtain of hair, eyes wide, glassy, brimming with tears. Her lips trembled like she was trying to say something, but no sound came out. And then she was gone. Not like she stepped back or turned away. She just blinked out. I left the closet faster than I care to admit. I told myself I was just tired, hallucinating from lack of sleep, maybe too much caffeine. Hospitals get into your head after a while. But that night, when I finally collapsed onto my bed, I couldn't sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw her, not just standing there this time, moving. Each time I blinked, she was closer. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, sheets twisted around my legs like restraints. My chest hurt from how hard my heart was pounding. When I sat up, something froze me completely. At the foot of my bed, pressed faintly into the bedsheet, was a handprint, too big to be mine. I live alone. The next day, I convinced myself it had to be some weird muscle twitch while I slept, or maybe the folds in the sheets just looked like a handprint. People see shapes in clouds, faces in shadows. It's called pareidolia. I clung to that explanation. But the nights got worse. The second time, I felt the weight first, like someone had sat on the edge of the mattress. I snapped awake and saw the faint dip right beside my legs. Nobody was there, but I swear I could feel the mattress shifting. The third time, I woke up because of the smell. Rotting flesh, damp and sour, filling the room. It was so strong I gagged. I turned on the lights and tore through my apartment looking for the source, half convinced something had died in the vents. Nothing. By the time I came back, the smell was gone. Then came the dreams. except they didn't feel like dreams. I'd be in my bed, but the room would look wrong. Stretched out, darker, like shadows were painted across the walls. She would be there, the woman in the gown standing in the corner. She never moved at first, just stared, eyes dripping. But then, step by step, she'd come closer. Her skin was pale, her face scarred like it had been dragged over broken glass. Her teeth were blackened, rotting. The closer she got, the heavier the air felt, like it was thickening in my lungs. One night she was an inch away from my face. I could feel the cold of her breath. When I screamed myself awake, I couldn't move for a solid minute, like my body had forgotten how. Sleep paralysis, maybe. That's what I told myself. Though deep down I didn't believe it. It started spilling into my waking hours. I'd catch glimpses of her in reflective surfaces, monitors, windows, even the shine of the ER floor tiles. Always behind me, always closer when I looked again. Once I walked past the closet with that mirror and nearly collapsed. It was faint, but I swear I heard sobbing inside. Low, choked sobbing, like someone trying not to be heard. I asked a couple coworkers if anything weird had happened to them in that supply room. They laughed it off, said I was overworked, probably hallucinating on no sleep, maybe sneaking some of the meds. One of them even joked that the ER was haunted, that patients who die in trauma sometimes hang around. But the way they laughed told me none of them really believed it. I stopped bringing it up. I also stopped using that sink, but it didn't matter. The thing followed me. It escalated last month. I was home, finally asleep after 3 nights of tossing and turning, when I woke to the sound of water running. The bathroom sink. I live alone. Nobody else has a key. When I got up to check, the faucet was on full blast, and in the mirror above the sink, my bathroom mirror this time, I saw her. Not standing still. Moving. Her hands were pressed against the glass from the inside. Her mouth opened wider than should have been possible, teeth jagged and black. Her eyes locked onto mine, and then she was gone again. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just sat on the couch with all the lights on, waiting for the sun to rise. The strangest part is how nobody else seems to notice. Not at the hospital, not anywhere. Just me, like she singled me out. I tried everything to rationalize it. Stress, hallucinations, maybe even some undiagnosed mental break. But even the rational explanations don't explain the physical stuff. The handprint, the water turning on, the smell. It's been 6 months now. She hasn't gone away. If anything, she's more present. I still see her in reflections, sometimes in the corner of my eye. Sometimes in dreams so vivid I wake up gasping for air, convinced I never actually left. Every time I look in a mirror, I hesitate, wondering if she'll be there again. And sometimes she is, always closer. I can't explain it. Maybe I'm losing my mind. Maybe I really am imagining all of this. But then again, maybe I'm not. All I know is I don't trust mirrors anymore, and I haven't used that supply closet sink since. Story number 4. I worked nights as a janitor at a really old hospital. It's one of those buildings that's been renovated a dozen times, but still has the original bones, with creaky pipes, endless white hallways, and wings that feel like they haven't been used in decades. I usually keep my head down, earbuds in, mop bucket rolling behind me. Nights are long, but mostly quiet, except for one thing. Every couple months, like clockwork, around 3:17 a.m., a specific hallway on the 3rd floor does something I still can't explain. I didn't even notice the first few times. I thought it was just a draft, but it wasn't the usual musty hospital cold. This was sharp, ice cold, the kind of cold that gets in your teeth. I'd be pushing my mop and suddenly I could see my own breath hanging in front of me. It's not just me either. I checked the thermostat once and it said 72. My skin prickled, my hands went numb, and it was only in that one hallway. What makes it worse is the fog. Not mist, not steam from the vents, but a white fog that seeps in from nowhere, curling around your ankles and then swallowing the hallway. It's the kind of fog you'd expect outside on a freezing morning, not inside a sealed hospital. The hallway itself has no rooms, just blank white walls and ceiling lights buzzing overhead. It feels like it shouldn't even exist, like it was built for no reason at all. During the day, it's just a corridor. At night, it feels like stepping into a place you're not supposed to be. The first night I got caught in it, I heard voices. Faint at first, like a radio station just out of tune. Whispering, muttering, sometimes a word clear enough to make me stop mopping. I remember hearing what sounded like someone sobbing. I walked up and down that whole stretch, shining my flashlight, but it was empty. Just me, the mop, and the echo of my shoes. One time, though, it got worse. I was halfway down, mopping, when I heard the wheels of a cart rolling behind me. Not unusual. I figured maybe one of the nurses had forgotten something. But when I turned, there was no one. Just the hallway, empty. No doors, no carts. Except there was a cart now. It stood in the middle of the hallway, metal shining under the buzzing fluorescent lights. My first thought was that I must have missed it when I walked in, but I swear it wasn't there when I started. I remember that empty stretch. I laughed it off because that's what you do at 3 a.m. when your brain is fried and you're alone in a place too quiet. I went back to mopping, but then the fog began to creep in, faster this time. It wasn't a slow build. It poured in, filling the corridor until I couldn't see past a couple feet. My mop bucket faded into white, and then I heard it, the squeak of wheels. The cart was moving. At first it was slow, like someone was pushing it carefully, letting it roll. Then faster, louder. I couldn't see a thing through the fog, but the sound came straight for me. Before I could move, something slammed into my shins. Hard, I went down, my legs screaming with pain. My hands hit the damp floor. I tried to peer through the fog, but all I saw was the endless stretch of the hallway. No person, no shadow, just the whiteness, buzzing lights overhead, and silence again. The cart was gone. That's when I started keeping track. Every time the clock hits 3:17, I avoid that hallway. But the thing is, it doesn't always let me. Sometimes the fog bleeds into nearby corridors, like it's reaching out. I'll smell this faint metallic tang in the air, almost like blood, and I'll know it's coming. Other times, it doesn't even wait for me to be there. I'll be cleaning a different floor, and I'll hear the squeak of wheels somewhere down below, even though I know every cart is accounted for. Or I'll see my own mop bucket start to roll a little, like it's being tugged. The scariest was last month. I was restocking paper towels in the supply closet, far from that cursed hallway. When I shut the door, the air was so cold I could see my breath. I was nowhere near 3:17. It was 1:42 on the clock. My flashlight flickered, and for a second I thought I saw a figure standing at the end of the aisle. Tall, blurry, almost blending with the wall. By the time I blinked, it was gone. I keep telling myself it's the building. Old pipes, vents, maybe mold in the ducts messing with me. Hospitals are full of chemicals, weird smells, drafts. A skeptic could explain it away. I want to believe that, I really do. But sometimes when I'm alone in the dead of night, pushing my mop down a quiet corridor, I feel like I'm not the only one working, like something else is moving alongside me, just out of sight. Last night, I made the mistake of passing that hallway again. I didn't mean to. I took the wrong turn. I froze at the mouth of it. The lights buzzed louder than usual, flickering one by one. The fog rolled in like it was waiting for me. I didn't go in. I couldn't. But as I turned away, I swear I felt the cold rush at my back, like someone exhaling down my neck. And then I heard it, wheels squeaking, fast, closing the distance. I didn't look back. I just ran. When I came in this morning, everything was normal. Warm air, clean walls, no fog, no cart, no proof. Just me, telling myself I've been awake too many nights, that maybe my brain's slipping a little. But tonight's another shift, another long stretch of silence, of buzzing lights, of empty hallways. And I know at some point, the clock will hit 3:17 again. I can avoid that hallway all I want, but deep down, I think whatever's there already knows where to find me. Story number 5. I work in a hospital, and while most of my job feels routine, med rounds, paperwork, checking vitals, there are moments that shake me in ways I can't explain. People talk about hospitals being haunted, but I never paid much attention. Working here long enough, though, you start realizing it's not just the medical emergencies that get under your skin. Sometimes it's the things you see in the corners, the things you hear when no one else is around. This happened a few months ago during a late afternoon shift. There was a patient on my list, a woman in her early 30s. She wasn't in for anything unusual, some mental health issues, physical exhaustion, things like that. I walked into her room to give her meds, and I noticed she was sitting upright on the bed, staring out the window. At first I thought she was just zoning out, but then I caught the movement of her lips. She was whispering something, carrying on a conversation. I asked her who she was talking to. She stopped, glanced at me briefly, then looked back at the window. After a pause, she said she was talking to her kids, who were playing outside. She even told me they were waving at me. I froze for a second. The window in her room looked out over a patch of hospital property that was basically just trees and dry leaves scattered on the ground. No kids, not even staff crossed that side. It was dead quiet. I brushed it off as part of her condition. People hallucinate, people talk to themselves. I gave her the meds, made a note, and left. But the next day it happened again. I went in and she was at the window, murmuring, smiling faintly like she was watching something that warmed her. She said her kids wanted to meet me, wanted to say hello. Again, there was nothing outside, just bare branches scratching at the glass in the breeze. I told myself it was harmless, but each day it started to feel heavier. Every single time she told me her kids were waving at me. Always that same phrase, like she needed me to acknowledge it. Then small things started showing up. One evening I was checking the room and noticed something by the window ledge. A tiny shoe, blue, scuffed, like the kind a 5-year-old might wear. I picked it up, confused. The floor she was on didn't house any child patients. I even asked the staff on duty. No one had seen it before. No one had given her anything. Another day, there was a crayon on the floor by her bed, a stubby red one, worn down on one end. I figured maybe she'd gotten hold of something from a visitor, or maybe someone dropped it during a shift. But when I asked the other nurses, they swore up and down that no crayons had ever been brought in. Patients aren't allowed to keep small objects like that anyway, for safety reasons. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe someone dropped them accidentally. Maybe she smuggled them in somehow. Rational explanations always feel easier when you're in a place like this, but it kept happening. Small objects that didn't belong. A marble one time, a tiny hair clip with a plastic butterfly on it another. Things you'd expect to find in a child's pocket, but never in her room. The real breaking point came on her last day there. I walked into the room with her meds, and she was talking again, louder this time. Her voice had a strange rhythm, almost like she was calming someone down. Then she looked at me and told me to look outside. I almost didn't, but something in her tone made me turn toward the window. And I swear to God, I saw them. 3 children out on the leaf-strewn ground. They looked normal at first, playing, chasing each other, waving up at the window. They smiled, and it wasn't threatening. It was the kind of wave you'd get from kids on a playground. For a moment, my chest went tight. Because they were real, I was certain of it. The woman's voice broke through the silence. She asked me if I thought her kids were beautiful. Then almost immediately, she apologized. She said she had burned them, but it wasn't intentional. When I looked back out the window, the kids weren't the same. Their bodies were blackened, skin peeling in places, clothes stuck to charred flesh. They didn't stop waving. Their movements were stiff, mechanical, but those smiles stayed frozen in place. I don't think I've ever felt my stomach drop so fast. I stumbled backward, leaving the meds on the table, and got out of the room as fast as I could. The woman passed not long after that. Cardiac arrest, sudden and quiet. She didn't leave behind much family. Some paperwork mentioned a fire accident years ago, but no details. No kids ever came to visit. I wish I could say I convinced myself it was stress, exhaustion, or the patient's delusion somehow rubbing off on me. That would make sense. People in hospitals see strange things all the time. Sleep deprivation, fluorescent lights, long shifts. Your brain can play tricks. But I can't explain the objects I found. I kept that crayon for a while, hidden in my locker. The stubby red piece worn just like a child would use it. I eventually threw it away because every time I saw it, my chest tightened. It felt wrong to hold on to it. Sometimes when I passed that wing of the hospital during late shifts, I avoid looking out the windows. The trees are still there, branches clawing at the glass. The leaves pile up the same way. But every once in a while, I feel like I catch movement in the corner of my vision. A quick flicker of something darting between the trunks, small and fast. I tell myself it's stray cats or the wind. But in quiet moments, I still see their faces. Those kids waving up at me with charred hands, waiting for someone to wave back. Story number 6. I don't really talk about this much because people either laugh or look at me like I'm exaggerating. But this happened last summer when I was volunteering at the local hospital. I was 17, just doing some hours for school credit. The hospital was an old one, the kind that had been renovated section by section, but still had entire wings that looked abandoned. One evening, the weather suddenly changed. The sky went from bright to pitch dark in a matter of minutes, and then a storm rolled in, with heavy rain pounding against the windows. Power flickered, backup generators buzzed. They told us volunteers to stay put until things calmed down. I realized I was stuck there for the whole night. After a while, boredom got the better of me. I started wandering. At first, I stayed on the main floors, but eventually curiosity pulled me to the stairwell. I noticed a sign for the 5th floor, even though I knew it was supposed to be closed for renovations. The barricade wasn't much, just some caution tape and a board leaned against the railing. I don't know why I crossed it, but I did. The 5th floor was dimly lit. Half the lights flickered, the rest dead. Paint cans and tools were scattered here and there, and plastic sheets covered parts of the hallway. As soon as I stepped onto the floor, I felt a sharp push on my back, like someone shoved me forward. I whipped around, but the hallway behind me was completely empty. I thought maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe I stumbled on my own. I kept walking, telling myself it was nothing, but soon I heard it. Footsteps, not just mine. There was a second set, matching me but slightly delayed. Every time I stopped, they stopped too. I turned to look behind me again, and nothing was there. At that point, I decided I'd had enough and tried to go back to the stairs. But when I turned around fully, my stomach dropped. The stairwell wasn't there anymore. What should have been a short walk back had stretched into this ridiculously long hallway, extending further than I remembered. The end looked blurry, like it was shifting away the more I tried to focus on it. I started walking faster, but the hallway never ended. Doors lined both sides, but every one of them was locked or stuck. I don't know how long I walked before I noticed the silence was broken by something else. Dripping, thick, slow drops hitting the floor near me. I looked up. Something hung from the ceiling. At first, I thought it was a plastic sheet caught on a pipe. But then I saw it wasn't plastic. It was a figure, its limbs bent the wrong way, clinging to the ceiling like an insect. Its face, or what looked like one, was pressed downward toward me. That was when a warm, viscous drop landed on my forehead. It smelled metallic, like rust mixed with rot. The thing shifted. Its head twitched as if it had noticed me. I remember my legs going weak, my vision spinning. The next thing I knew, it was morning. I was lying on a stretcher in one of the ground floor rooms. A doctor told me they'd found me unconscious near the 4th floor washroom. No one mentioned the 5th floor. I nodded like I understood, but in my head I knew where I had been. For a few days I tried to forget about it, but then the rashes started. At first it was just itchy red marks along my arms, nothing unusual. But then I noticed the shape. They weren't random. They formed lines and swirls like patterns burned into my skin. At night the itching would flare into a burn so strong I'd have to bite my pillow to stop myself from screaming. By morning they would fade as if nothing had been there. I showed a doctor, but by the time I got into his office, the rashes were gone. He gave me a cream for allergic reactions. My parents thought it was stress, but I knew. Every night it came back. One night I decided to watch in the mirror. I stayed awake until the patterns appeared. They didn't rise all at once. They crawled over my skin like invisible fingers, etching them into me. My reflection looked like something out of a ritual. I tried to photograph it. Strangely, the camera showed nothing. My skin looked normal, even while I watched the angry red shapes burn in real time. I thought I was losing it. Around the same time, other things started happening. Small, almost dismissible things. The sound of dragging feet when I was alone in the hospital corridors. Lights flickering whenever I passed. Once I caught a glimpse of something in a window reflection, a shadow bent backward, clinging to the frame like the thing on the ceiling. When I turned, no one was there. The worst was the dreams. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, remembering only fragments. Long hallways stretching forever, ceilings that bulged and dripped. Something watching from the corners. Every morning after, the patterns would be darker, more defined. Skeptics say I probably fainted from exhaustion that night on the 5th floor. Maybe the push I felt was just me tripping. Maybe the footsteps were echoes. Maybe the dripping ceiling was a paint tarp leaking water. The rashes could have been hives, stress-related. That's the rational explanation. I try to tell myself that sometimes, but even now, a year later, I avoid hospitals altogether. I don't take volunteer shifts anymore. The last time I drove past the building, I felt a burning on my arms, right where the rashes used to be. I didn't even stop, just kept driving. And here's the part that keeps me up at night: the patterns. They weren't random. A friend once said they looked like symbols, almost like writing. I never figured out what they meant, but sometimes when I wake up at night and look at my skin under the faint light, I swear I can still see faint outlines of them, like they're waiting to come back. Maybe I imagined all of it. Maybe it was just a bad night and my mind played tricks. Or maybe when I stepped onto that 5th floor, I saw something I wasn't supposed to. All I know is, I don't think the hospital's 5th floor was ever meant for people anymore. And sometimes I wonder if the thing on the ceiling ever really let me go. Story number 7. I worked at a trauma center as a surgical intern, mostly night shifts because seniors took the better slots. Night shifts are long and quiet, broken only by the occasional emergency or the beeping of monitors in the ICU. The fluorescent lights always felt harsher at night, buzzing faintly like they wanted to drill into your skull. That particular night, I was buried in paperwork. It was around 2:30 in the morning, the halls unusually empty. Even the nurses seemed quieter than usual, tucked away in the lounge. I was alone in the small room near the surgical wing, the kind where the air conditioner made a low, vibrating hum, and the walls were yellowed from years of fluorescent light. The intercom on the wall crackled suddenly. My head snapped up, expecting an announcement. Instead, there was nothing but static. It wasn't just noise. It was this deep, pulsing distortion, like someone was breathing into the mic. I waited, thinking maybe the operator had leaned on the switch, but it went dead after about 10 seconds. At first, I thought it was a prank. Medical interns are favorite targets for bored staff on night duty. I went back to scribbling notes when I heard it. Knocks. Not soft ones either. Heavy, deliberate knocks echoing through the corridor. They came in sets of 3, long pauses between them. I opened the door, stepped into the hallway and saw nothing. The air was stale, heavy with disinfectant. The ICU lights glowed dimly at the far end, but the hall itself was empty. No footsteps, no shadows, nothing. I went back inside trying to shake it off, but the knocks started again, louder this time, almost like they were right against the door I had just closed. My pulse jumped, but when I yanked it open, the hallway was still as empty as before. I stood there for a good minute, scanning left and right. I even walked a few steps down the corridor, but it was dead silent. That's when the alarm went off, a piercing, shrieking sound that rattled the walls. My first thought was fire. I bolted down the hallway, shoes squeaking against the polished floor. When I turned the corner near the stairwell, I stopped dead. A child sat curled in the corner of the hallway, knees tucked to chest, rocking slightly. The kid was sobbing, soft and broken, like someone had hurt him badly. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. His hospital gown was torn at the shoulder, his hair a tangled mess. I crouched slowly, calling out to ask if he was okay. He stopped sobbing mid-breath, like someone had hit pause. His head turned toward me, stiff and jerky, and that's when I saw his eyes, bright, unnatural yellow, glowing like 2 tiny lamps in the dark. My stomach dropped. His mouth opened, and fangs, long, needle-sharp fangs, glinted under the flickering hallway light. He lunged impossibly fast for his size and clamped down on my wrist. The pain was blinding, a sharp, burning sting that radiated up my arm. I screamed and swung, somehow managing to wrench free. The skin on my wrist was torn, blood smearing down my sleeve. I ran without thinking. My legs carried me toward the emergency exit, my ears filled with the pounding of my heart. Bursting through the door, I stumbled outside into the cold night air. I collapsed against the wall, gasping, clutching my bleeding wrist. When I looked up, I froze. The kid was standing on the balcony above me, but he wasn't a kid anymore. His body had stretched, grotesque and wrong, his limbs too long, his face twisted into something that was half human, half animal. Feathers sprouted from his back, oily black things that quivered as though alive. His mouth stretched unnaturally wide, revealing rows of those jagged fangs. And then he leapt. The last thing I remember was a blur of feathers and glowing eyes rushing toward me. When I came to, I was lying on the asphalt near my car. A colleague was standing over me, shaking my shoulder. He said I had slipped while walking to my car, must have hit my head. I laughed weakly, but my wrist throbbed. When I pulled back my sleeve, the skin was torn exactly where those fangs had sunk in. 2 deep puncture marks stared back at me, swollen and angry. My colleague frowned, asked what happened. I couldn't answer. I just nodded and let him help me up. For a brief second, while he steadied me, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Behind him in the glow of the corridor light, the same kid stood. The same hospital gown, the same messy hair. His yellow eyes burned, and his lips twisted into a grin too wide for his small face. He laughed silently, shoulders shaking with it. Then he vanished. No one else saw him. No alarms were reported that night. The nurses swore they hadn't called me on the intercom. Security footage showed nothing unusual in the hallways. And yet, weeks later, the bite mark is still on my wrist. It hasn't healed. Sometimes during night shifts, I catch static buzzing faintly from the intercom, just for a few seconds. And once in a while, when the halls go quiet, I swear I hear those slow, deliberate knocks again. I tell myself it was a hallucination, maybe sleep deprivation, maybe stress, that I slipped, hit my head, and imagined everything else. But every time I wash my hands before scrubbing in, I see the scar. 2 neat puncture marks that never fade. And I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched from just around the corner of the ward.